The visual is not important here. The music is not important here. The voice is not important here. What matters are the words. If you cannot listen to the words, you do not belong here. If you understand this, welcome to the Fate Club. Something has shifted recently without any official announcement, and many people have begun to sense that reactions which once appeared instantly now hesitate, soften, or disappear entirely, as if the old internal machinery that translated reality into urgency is no longer being supplied with enough energy to justify its constant operation. The tension that once structured everyday life, silently directing decisions, ambitions, and comparisons, does not vanish because it has been resolved, but because it is gradually losing relevance for a system that is no longer optimized for perpetual alertness. What once felt necessary now feels excessive, and what once demanded immediate response now passes through awareness without leaving a lasting trace, not as indifference, but as a quiet recalibration of priorities occurring beneath conscious intention. A form of fatigue emerges that cannot be attributed to lack of sleep or physical exhaustion, presenting itself instead as a signal that a survival-oriented mode of processing reality has exceeded the sustainable limits of the body and the nervous system. This fatigue does not ask for rest in the traditional sense because it is not caused by effort alone, but by prolonged internal tension created by constant evaluation, self-monitoring, and the need to maintain coherence within a world that no longer feels internally aligned. The relationship to time begins to loosen subtly, almost imperceptibly, as memories lose their emotional grip and projections into the future stop generating the same urgency, not because outcomes no longer matter, but because the mind no longer needs to rehearse survival scenarios that once felt unavoidable. Time ceases to function as a pressure mechanism and begins to resemble a neutral medium through which experiences pass, leaving behind less residue, less attachment, and fewer internal negotiations. Authorities, systems, and collective narratives that once appeared stable and unquestionable start to reveal themselves as temporary arrangements formed under conditions that are no longer present, and their influence diminishes without confrontation, without rebellion, and without the need for disbelief. They simply lose their gravitational pull, as if the internal structures that once responded to them have quietly reorganized. Conflicts that once consumed attention and emotional energy now appear distant, almost abstract, as though they are unfolding in a parallel layer of reality that no longer requires personal identification. The absence of engagement is not avoidance, but a sign that the nervous system no longer recognizes these conflicts as signals of immediate threat. This shift does not represent an achievement or a reward, but a biological and mental adaptation comparable to the body adjusting its breathing at higher altitude, where old patterns become inefficient and new ones emerge without conscious planning. There is no moment of arrival, no clear boundary, only a gradual loss of compatibility with patterns that once defined identity and purpose. An identity constructed around roles, productivity, and continuous self-assessment begins to loosen, not through resistance, but through lack of internal reinforcement, like a muscle that releases simply because it can no longer justify remaining tense. In this process, reality is no longer something that demands interpretation or correction, but something that is quietly registered, allowing perception to exist without immediate reaction. As observation replaces reflex, the impulse to intervene weakens, and with it fades the illusion that constant action is required to maintain coherence. What was once described as higher or lower states of being reveals itself as nothing more than different modes of information processing, where fear-based filtering gradually gives way to a quieter, less defensive perception. There is no elevation involved, only a reduction of internal noise. The old world does not collapse dramatically because it does not need to be destroyed. It simply loses functionality as the conditions that once sustained it change faster than language can keep pace with. Structures remain visible, routines continue, and systems operate as before, yet their internal relevance has already faded. This creates a peculiar sensation that something significant has already ended, even as calendars advance, news cycles repeat, and social rituals persist unchanged. The contradiction is not a malfunction, but a natural consequence of consciousness transitioning from a state of constant survival into a state where silence is no longer perceived as absence, but as a stable background of experience. Without ceremonies, announcements, or collective acknowledgement, the processing of reality gradually shifts from external stimulation into an inner space where events lose their dramatic charge and retain only their bare presence. In this inner space, attention no longer searches for conclusions, explanations, or resolutions, because the need to finalize experience dissolves along with the urgency that once sustained it. What remains is not a new belief, nor a new structure to follow, but a quieter continuity in which reality no longer demands agreement or resistance to be allowed to exist. Nothing needs to be added, corrected, or completed because the process unfolds independently of recognition or belief. What remains is not meaning but clarity, and not certainty but a quiet alignment with conditions as they are. If you understand this, welcome to the club.